Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good. I want to thank Kevin for that wonderful introduction. I want to thank your General President, Harold Schaitberger. Thank you very much for your friendship, your partnership, and your leadership. It's a tremendous honor for me to be here with you and your entire team. I want to thank Rich Rule, who's the president of Local 2000, our firefighters in Howard County, Maryland. Rich, stand up so you can be recognized. I'm going to talk about you in my speech. You might as well know who I'm talking about. I also want to mention, although he couldn't be here, Lieutenant Mike Runn from our fire department, who's president of the Maryland State Professional Firefighters in Maryland, and he had to be in Annapolis because they're still fighting the good fight down in Annapolis today, but I want to make sure I recognized Mike. I'm here to say thank you. And as Kevin said, you've heard from national leadership, you've heard from state leadership, you've heard from leaders in Wisconsin. Thank you very much for helping the great fights in Wisconsin and Ohio. But it's important for us to remember and think of the local level. And it is cities and counties across this country where basic services are provided, and basic services are provided by the people in this room, the heroes in this room. So thank you. Howard County, Maryland, as was mentioned, if you haven't been there, you've probably driven through it and not realized where 95 goes right through it between Baltimore and Washington. Last year, we were named the second best place to live in America by CNN and Money Magazine, something I'm very proud of. In fact, if anyone's here from Eden Prairie, Minnesota, I got a bone to pick with you because we're coming after you. Somehow you're the number one place to live in America. I don't think much of Eden. No, I'm just kidding. I just want to tell you the story of my relationship with IAFF and Local 2000. And I want you to hear it because I want to really make sure I thank you collectively for our relationship and partnership, and let you know that what you do at the local level is tremendously important. When I was getting ready, thinking about running for the county council at age 27, God, it seems like a long time ago, before I had a little bit of gray coming in, and I reached out to our local firefighters and I said, you know what, I need an education. I need you to tell me what the important issues are in Howard County. Frankly, I grew up in Columbia, Maryland. I grew up in Howard County. I didn't really understand what a combination system was. I didn't know, frankly, that there was a difference between the volunteer companies and the career companies and what was funded by Howard County budget and what wasn't. And I needed that education. And that education started with Rich Rule, who was secretary at the time, coming to my office and starting that education process. And they offered to do a ride-along. And I said, sure, let's do a ride-along. And I remember that ride-along. I remember every call that I went on that day. I remember the things that I learned. I remember going into homes where there was a language barrier. I remember the medical calls. I remember doing the preparation between calls, getting the apparatus ready. I remember how much work it took to be prepared for every call. I also remember, unfortunately, when the firefighter who was with me, who I always will remember to this day because his name was Mike Anashevsky, and I never forgot, when he asked me if I was scared of heights, I should have said yes. But instead I said no, and he put me up in a bucket, and we went up about 90 feet, and I seemed to be okay. So then he started moving it around and making it go up and down, and finally I said, all right, that's enough. But I remember that experience to that day. And I know that in my first election for county council, I won my election by 36 votes. 36 votes out of about 8,000 votes cast. So I know that Local 2000 was the difference in my election for county council. I remember the black and gold. I remember the firefighters for Ken Ulman shirts and the signs that we had back then, and we've had in every election since. And 4 years later, when I was elected county executive, it was because of the strength of the firefighters. You were my first endorsement, and I never forgot it. And I can tell you that relationship has paid off. That relationship has paid off in many ways. In Howard County, we were able to change the law of how we pick a fire chief. It used to be determined by the volunteer companies. It's now determined by the county executive. We were able to, working together, sign the most significant contract, which provided a 6% COLA in each of 4 years on top of a step in my first year in office. We did that kind of a contract because I recognized because I recognize that it's how we take care of our heroes, how we work together. And by the way, it's easy for folks to stand up and talk about our heroes in the context of 9/11, of which I continue to remember and hold up that place for those brave men and women on that day. But it's also how we treat our heroes on March 26, 2012. Not just when the TV cameras are on, but every single day. There's a firefighter, not just in Howard County, but in every community around this country, who is risking his or her life today to save a citizen's life. Each and every day that happens. And that's why I made sure that we made progress when it came to that contract. I must say, to credit the partnership that we have, when the economy took its downturn, there was a lot of talk of whether or not we were going to be able to continue to meet that contract. And I was committed on day one and every day that our word is our bond, and we were going to keep that commitment to that contract. But as a tribute to our relationship, I think, as a testament to our relationship, it was Local 2000 that called me voluntarily and said, could we defer part of that contract to work together? We understand that these are tough times and we got to work together. And so that's the kind of partnership that only happens when you have this kind of relationship. When it comes to binding arbitration, we have binding arbitration in Howard County. I was the first citizen, as a county council member, I was the first citizen to sign as we took that to the voters in the year 2006, and it passed. I knew I'd never have to use it, but I'm proud that we have it in Howard County. And so as there are some folks around this country that are trying to tear down collective bargaining, we're building it up. I can tell you that as there are places around this country that are closing fire stations, we're opening 2 new fire stations later this year that were under construction. And we have made progress in Howard County when it comes to response times using technology. We're not building fire stations because they were in the pipeline on somebody's wish list, and we're not building them where somebody wanted them. We're building them where it will drive down response times, because at the end of the day, this is about saving our loved ones' lives. And let me tell you a story real quick of what happened just last year, actually about a year and a half ago. And I tell this story as often as possible because I want people to understand what we're really talking about. One morning, my wife's best friend, a young mother of 3 children, was getting her kids ready for school that day, was in their little laundry room off of the kitchen, and all of a sudden she collapsed. Turns out that she had what they call an arrhythmia, sudden death syndrome, collapsed. Her youngest son ran upstairs. Her husband happened to be home. He wasn't supposed to be home, but he was running late, and he was getting dressed, and he ran downstairs, saw her out, couldn't get a pulse, called 911. The well-trained dispatcher walked him through chest compressions, and the firefighters, paramedics, EMTs from Howard County got to her home in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. They then used the defibrillator twice, got a pulse. Got her in the ambulance, and on the way to Howard County General Hospital, they started the cooling technique to bring down her body temperature. She was then put in a helicopter and taken to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. When I got there, the fire chief was there who had met me there, and the president of Howard County General Hospital both told me that she would not make it. After 3 days in induced hypothermia at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, they started bringing her temperature back up. They didn't know if she would have brain damage. They didn't know what the status would be. Today, she is 100% completely fine, no effects whatsoever. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. When At the end of the day, we can talk about all the politics we want and all of the nonsense and other folks on usually the other side that want a demagogue and talk about pensions and talk about all these things. At the end of the day, we want the most well-trained, brave man or woman, firefighter, EMT, paramedic, to get to our loved one as quickly as possible. That's what this is about. And that's why the things that you do to support candidates like me that put our values where they should be. That's why when you do things like Fire Ops 101, I can tell you we had Fire Ops 101 in Howard County, and I made all of our senior staff, all of my cabinet do it. And I can tell you, still to this day, I don't like wearing that self-contained breathing apparatus. It wasn't comfortable. I didn't like crawling around in the dark in that burned building with smoke. But to this day, I remember the experience of doing it. I remember having to carry out that big dummy, I think it was a dummy, whatever it's actually called. Not referring to anyone here. I remember having to crawl that. No, it's not Rich. I'm not talking about Rich. I remember having to help carry that person down 3 flights of steps out of that makeshift house. I remember what it was like to cut into a car on a scene. And those are the experiences that each and every one should have, because it'll give you the perspective of what each and every one of you does every day to keep us safe. It was in that Fire Ops 101, by the way, that I was carrying a hose, and there were 4 firefighters, supposed to be pretending to be firefighters, carrying the hose, running up the stairs when they pulled one of them off, just to make me realize the difference between having 3 firefighters on an engine versus 4. And I can tell you, with the help of a SAFER grant, we got 12 firefighters, and we now have 4 on our busiest pieces of apparatus, and we're making progress towards all. So again, I just want you to know that your work matters. The relationships that you build at the local level with county commissioners and county supervisors and county council members. It's true, I'm now chairman of the National Democratic County Officials, and it's our job to make sure that the voices of county leaders are heard. Because again, counties are where basic services, public works, public safety are provided. And in times of emergencies, it's cities and counties that are there at the ground. So the last thing I want to leave you with is just, I was thinking about it when I was standing on the side for a second. When I talk to elementary school kids, I try to get them, and I want you to just think about it, I try to get them to think in basic levels, because we have to capture these kids' attention early, because once they get old, they realize, they start hearing politics as, a dirty word, and they hear all these negative things. At the end of the day, local government is about doing things that we can't do, doing things collectively that we can't do ourselves. So I get them to think about our budget. I say, what is our budget? It's we all chip in for things that we can't do ourselves. So I pick a library near where the school is, and I say, how many of you have as many books in your house as they have at that library? And people say no. I say, well, what would you do if you wanted lots of books? Well, you'd all chip in your money. You'd build a big building or rooms, you'd put the books there, and then you'd share them, right? What would you do if you wanted a big park? Nobody has that much land in their backyard. You would all chip in, you'd buy a piece of land, you'd build a park, big playgrounds and fields, and you'd open it up and everyone could use it and share it. Well, what do we do when it comes to public safety? I usually ask them, I said, how many of you have an ambulance that sits in your driveway every day? And usually there's one kid whose mom or dad is a firefighter, and they raise their hand. I say, no one can have a firefighter living at their house. Most people can't have a firefighter living at their house, an ambulance in your driveway every day. So what do? We all chip in our money, and we hire some men and women to answer the phone. We set up a phone number that we can all share, and we know in emergencies we call. And we make sure that we use that money to hire brave men and women who will be there as quickly as possible, well-trained, to help save our lives and save the lives of the loved ones in our family. That's what this is about. So where are our values? How do you put a price on that? How do you put a price on that extra minute that my wife's best friend would not be with us? 30 more seconds, not with us. How do you put a price on that? You can't put a price on it. And it's up to us collectively to continue to remind people that that's what this is about. Brave men and women, heroes, saving our lives collectively every day in every community in America. Thank you very much for what you do, and thanks for having me today.